Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Eden Strader, a destination wedding photographer turned business coach, and I have gotten to photograph love and celebration everywhere from Switzerland to Hawaii. I did this for several years, and so I'm so excited to have you here to teach you how to do the same. Here on this channel, we're going to be talking about everything from photography to how to run your business, making sure that you are running it as a CEO and not a paper-pushing employee, but also making sure that you know how to shoot things like artificial light, how to edit correctly, all of that good stuff. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and I'm so excited to have you here. Today we're going to go through Q&As of being a destination wedding photographer, shooting in studio, artificial light, how to pose our couples, all of that good stuff. Make sure you leave any additional questions below so that we can cover them next time. Okay, number one is how to charge for travel when you're getting started in destination weddings. And you have a few options. When I first started in my career, I would charge quote by quote. So I would look up hotel, flight, ground transportation, all of that good stuff, and give my couple a specific quote based on where their wedding was located. This, however, was not my favorite thing, and I do not recommend doing this as a wedding photographer. It's so easy for your clients to go find another flight that's an overnight or a horrible red eye or has 10,000 layovers because it's $100 instead of $500. And so I also didn't love the idea of my couples in California having to pay nothing compared to like my couples across the country. What I found worked best for me was a flat rate out-of-state package. So I had a package for out-of-state weddings within the US and then an international booking package. These rates were higher because I'm taking multiple days off to travel. I don't get to work, I don't get to book other shoots. So that's absolutely something that you should prepare for. But on top of that, I would just account for kind of like the average cost of travel on the higher end, or even what like a most expensive travel expense would be, because no matter what you quote your clients, if you're doing it on a quote by quote basis, I promise you traveling is going to cost more than you expected. You will always end up paying at least a little bit out of pocket. And so I found it was easiest to just total up what I was on average having to spend and then just add that on top of the rate of the higher package since I was gone again for multiple days. I love doing a flat rate. It cut back a lot on the back and forth that I also had with my clients. There wasn't really anything to argue because it was just one flat rate package. Next question is, do I always shoot in Kelvin? And the answer is yes. 51 to 5200 is technically daylight, but I've found that there's quite a bit of variation on what that looks like depending on the lighting situation you're actually in. And so I like to shoot a little bit on the warm side, but not too warm. It makes things a lot easier in post, especially with skin tones. So usually I'm sitting anywhere between like 61 to 6500. The only time I'm going to go above or below that is I'm going to go below if I'm in a tungsten situation and not using artificial light, or I'm going to go above it if I'm in blue hour or deep shade or somewhere where the photos are looking a little too cool. But I would highly recommend using Kelvin to make sure that you're getting a consistent look across all of your galleries. I do not recommend shooting anything in an automatic setting, whether that is your camera or your white balance or your flash. You need to learn how to use manual so that you can always have control over your artistry. How did I learn to pose my couples? So the thing about posing is there's not really a right or wrong. It is totally dependent on what you want to do as a photographer. And then you need to make sure that you're communicating that properly. So if you want to take an unposed approach, great, do that. Make sure that your clients know that that's the approach you're going to take. You should be including that in your marketing, on your website, all of that good stuff. Same if you're going to take more of a traditional approach to posing. Like if you are going to be a little bit more hands-on, that's totally fine. When I first started my wedding photography career, I specialized in more editorial posing. I shoot a lot in studios. I love a more high fashion, high end feel to couple sessions. But then on wedding days, I also love a more laid back approach. I want my couple to feel like they're naturally guided. I can give them little prompts because I know it's scary to be in front of the camera and know what to do with your hands. But overall, I want them to exist by themselves. I want to capture their day as it exists. So when you're posing your couples, I would first ask yourself if you even want to pose them. Like what feels good to you? What kind of photographer do you want to be? Figure that out first and then make sure you're communicating that through all of your marketing, your website. Make sure everything is reflective of that so that your clients know what to expect before hiring you. If you do want to take a more posed approach, I would experiment. Make sure that you're incorporating a lot of movement. That is my number one. If you keep your clients still and stiff, they're going to look still and stiff. Prompt them to walk around, spin around, talk, go on a little walk, whatever it needs to be. Maybe give them an activity to do if you're shooting something like them going to a coffee shop or recreating their first date, but give them opportunities to move around so they don't get stiff, stuck, and start looking a little bit weird, because they're going to start over analyzing if they look good. And if you're wondering if you look good, you're going to tighten up and it's not going to look great. So I would make sure to just incorporate a lot of movement if you're wanting to be someone who's a little bit more hands-on. How do you make your feed more cohesive and aesthetically pleasing? I first want to say that if you are going off of an Instagram feed specifically, release the pressure. It doesn't need to be perfect. However, there are lots of tips and tricks that you can incorporate to make it look as great as possible, right? It's our first impression. I also recommend structuring your website and portfolio in a similar way that you do your Instagram, because at the end of the day, Instagram is just a free portfolio. One of the ways that you can do this is by rotating like lighter and darker photos, or you can rotate color and black and white photos. You can rotate simpler photos with more maximalistic photos. You can even rotate things like detail photos with portraits, but just kind of come up with a system where you're either doing every other one, every third, and just kind of set yourself almost this little guide, this little blueprint to follow. That's how you're going to create an aesthetically appealing feed. What are my favorite lenses as a wedding photographer? So like any wedding photographer over my last several years of shooting weddings, I have gone through so many lenses. I've bought them, sold them, rented them, all of the things. And this is what I found was my favorite. I have a 24mm that I love for wide shots and storytelling. I have a 58mm that is kind of my workhorse. It is great for portraits and storytelling, but I also can get wide enough to get wider shots. It is an amazing portrait lens. I also have a 70-200, which I highly recommend a lens like this if you are a wedding photographer specifically, because it is an absolute game changer at things like cocktail hour, during the ceremony. Anytime that you don't want to be like up in your client's grill, that 70-200 is going to be an absolute lifesaver. As you grow your portfolio and you grow your income and you want to add in some fun lenses, I also have a 45mm tilt shift, which is incredibly fun to play around with, but that is not something I would recommend investing in the beginning of your career. I would focus on getting a great fixed lens that can be good for portraits, something like a 50, a 58, even an 85 if you wanted, and then a wider lens like a 24mm or a 35mm. How to start elevating your photography in an artistic sense. So photography, for most of you, probably started as a hobby. I know for me it did. And so when we become full-time wedding photographers or we start doing this as a career, it's so easy for it to kind of start losing a little bit of the artistic expression or losing the magic just because now money is involved. And it's so important that you don't lose that as a creative. One of my biggest recommendations as a photographer is to find inspiration outside of your niche of photography. So if you're a wedding photographer, study other versions of photography. Maybe that's fashion, landscape, whatever it is that you feel called to, but really try to find inspiration outside of the wedding world. Pay attention to concepts like lighting, motion, textures, color, composition, even find inspiration in things like artwork. Go to a museum, and then try to sit with that and figure out how you can bring that into your photography. There is so much crossover in the things that we naturally love and the ways that we can bring them into our photography. So just make sure that you're staying present, being intentional, and start studying what you feel naturally called to so that you can start bringing it into your work. How do you turn inquiries into bookings? This is such a good question because I know something that people have been struggling with a lot the last several months is ghosting. The way that you approach your email inquiries is kind of like your last impression. It's your last chance to close that sale. Make sure you're answering every question they may have before they even have the chance to ask it. So think to yourself, are they going to want to see full galleries? Are they going to maybe want to see some reviews? Are they going to have frequently asked questions? Make sure that you're presenting a beautiful and branded investment guide that really walks them through the entire experience, right? Especially if you're wanting to charge multiple of thousands of dollars for your services. You need to be offering an experience that matches that price point. So an investment guide is a great way to kick that off. Have something that walks through your philosophy, your approach to the artwork, several reviews, examples, the packages, maybe an FAQ section where they get to learn the answers to their questions that they were going to ask. That is going to be so much more impressive than you just sending over a list of pricing. Again, when it comes to wedding photography, this is a huge investment and it's also a really personal experience. So I love closing out my email by offering the opportunity to hop on a call once they've looked through my pricing guide to make sure we're a good fit to hear about their day. And if I don't hear back from them, I'm not afraid to follow up. You got to think these couples are going through so much trying to plan their day. They're keeping track of so many things. So don't take it personally if you don't hear back. Follow up and give them the opportunity to discuss further with you. How do you deal with bad lighting when you don't have a flash? One, please have a flash. But if you don't have access to a flash, just be intentional with the way that the lighting is hitting your client's features. So maybe it's harsh lighting or split lighting. If it's not a ceremony and it's a situation where you can move around your client, you can personally move around, have a little bit more control, really focus on making sure that their facial features are staying in consistent lighting. If they have really harsh overhead lighting or side lighting and it's creating raccoon eyes or weird shadows, that's where things start really looking funky. So focus on keeping those facial features in consistent lighting, and that will make your images look so much better. How do you make couples feel more comfortable in front of the camera? One, I always, before I pull out my camera, make sure to have a little pep talk with my clients of sorts. One, to just reassure them, and hopefully at this point, right, you have a client workflow that has reassured them, comforted them, you've built a relationship with them. I just like to give them one more reminder that like, hey, there's nothing you can do wrong. I am the professional here. I got this. If you don't know what to do with your hands, feel free to ask me, but I'm going to give you gentle prompts. But I want you to just focus on each other, focus on your relationship. As much as you can, try to pretend I'm not here. I'll tell you if you're doing anything weird, but really the only thing you can do wrong here is act differently than you normally would. Just giving them this initial pep talk is really helpful so that they know they can just simmer, let you do your job. And for the first prompt, I always like doing something simple, like just prompting them to walk around, hold hands, give each other some love. I always will be like, oh, I'm just going to get my settings correctly so that they like feel like there's no pressure. This kind of gives them the opportunity to decompress before we really get into things. All right, that is all for Q&As today, you guys. We have a special offer linked for you below for our wedding photography bundle to help you with basically everything you would ever need within your wedding photography career. That is linked for you below. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to comment them, and we will see you next time.